Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have some terrifying Dogman encounters to share with you. Also, I want to apologize for not sharing the print that my friend sent me. I did do a community post, and I'm going to use it in tonight's video. There's a couple people that are calling it a hoax and saying it's fraudulent. Well, either you're not keen on what the word hoax means and you didn't go past 7th grade, but a hoax is when two people are in on something or one person is in on something to try to fool somebody. My friend Andrew and myself were not in on anything. I called him and I told him about my channel. I told him about my book deal. I haven't spoken to him in after 15 years. I asked him if he knew anybody that had possibly seen anything because he lives in Northern California and I knew he had a farm. And he sent me these pictures, not claiming that they were a Dogman. So for those people who are saying it's a hoax, it's fraudulent, well, you're either a troll or you have the IQ of a gerbil. So I'm going with both. Anyway, on to the links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All of those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, scary voice acting, stories that really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything you're into, follow that link. Give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. And last but not least, Dogman, Frightening Encounters Volume 1 and 2, written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny, is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. The links to those are in the description below as well. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter. Back around 20 years ago, I was visiting my great-uncle in the region around Kerrville, Texas. At the time, he was living in his first home in the area before he moved to a retirement community near a set of small trees. The trees were beautiful, really, as the hill country is. I was staying with him and my great-aunt for about a week when we went out one evening for a walk with his dachshund, as we tended to do. The walk was uneventful, as the sunset was setting, just a normal evening complete with calls of doves and other wildlife. And the dog was just having a wonderful time. Then suddenly, all the wildlife went deafeningly silent, and both of us froze, as well as the dog. I remember having a distinct sense of unease and fear that I could not quite explain, and the dog was looking directly in a specific area near the spotlight streetlight. My eyes turning to where the dog was looking, there was a creature loping through there. A dog-like creature about the size of a large Labrador Dachshund hybrid. Save that, on the creature's neck there was a head the size of a bear. And the thing was loping up and down, in the way kind of fitted the size of the build. It looked hypnotic in the sense that I was more terrified than I had ever been with anything else I had ever seen. It gave me a visceral understanding of Lovecraft's idea that things that just look fundamentally wrong are terrifyingly precisely because the proportions do not fit. That thing was powerfully built as well. The upper limbs in particular were very stout. And the dog remained frozen for another few minutes before we moved back to the house. I'm not precisely sure of what it was, or even if it was a Dogman, but it convinced me that something like that could exist. The sudden silence that lasted for a few moments after it left, and the dog just being frozen without even growling or barking, still sends chills in me when I remember it. As my only encounter with something like a cryptid as well, it remains something very vivid in my mind. Not less because I know how dogs move, I know how wolves would move like. And whatever that was, it was so not natural. It made no sense. The head was so massive that it dragged the body down with it when it moved. It had a very fluid aspect to the motion at the same time. and that dissonance is what made it hypnotic. Also, not an easy thing to forget because it just looked wrong. Head goes down, back limbs go up. Head goes up, upper body goes up with it. All in this fluid motion. To be as specific as I can get. Today's second encounter. Since June 2017, this eyewitness has been seeing something at night when he goes out to his yard. At first, he didn't know what it was, but he could see large yellow eye shine approximately 3 feet off the ground. States that when he sees this being, he gets the fight or flight feeling. He told the being, "I'm not afraid of you, so don't mess with me." His neighbor also saw the being in the dark of the night. When the eyewitness started to walk towards the being, it backed away. The witness went forward again, and the being went up a tree. It sounded heavy, but it didn't growl or anything. It just watched him. He said that he went inside to get his knife, and when he came back out, the thing was gone. His neighbor said that he was walking the Ice Age trail at night and heard heavy breathing trailing him and his wife, although he couldn't see anything, but he says he did hear something with long nails walking on the pavement, and it sounded like there was more than one of them. He also heard hyena-type laughing from this creature. The neighbor says that he saw 5 sets of eyeshine that night, 4 pair yellow, 1 pair red. Says the eyeshine was above his head, and he's 5'11", so the creatures had to be 6.5 to 7 feet tall. The howl they heard was similar to some sort of Dogman howl they heard on a website. Thursday, it was trash day. The neighbor was taking his trash to the curb at 2 a.m. before he went to work. And in the lights of his truck, he saw something in front of his truck. He said it looked like a wolf on steroids, very muscular. He said that the head reached his chest when it was on all fours. It looked like a bodybuilder. It stared at him and yipped. The neighbor then left. He said the eyeshine was yellowish amber. A week later, the eyewitness was taking his dogs out of their backyard kennel and bringing them to the house. The witness let his bulldog in and then saw 2 eyes shining yellow in his yard. The witness said the creature was about 40 feet from him. It had huge eyeshine. He calmly told it, "I don't care if you're here, but don't mess with my family or my dogs." Then he put his other dogs in the house and went in himself. At approximately 3 in the morning, they were awoken by loud animal noises that sounded like a whistle, scream, and hum all in the same time. It seemed like they were some sort of infrasound. About 2 weeks after, the witness and his neighbor saw the creature about 8:30. It was still light out. His neighbor had built a bonfire, and when they were done, he poured water on it, and it smoked and made noise that must have startled the creature, who was sitting on all fours in some taller grass some feet away. They didn't see it sitting there until the fire smoked and sizzled, and then the creature rose up out of the tall grass on 2 legs. It looked around and then looked right at them. He said it had very large muscles, but a skinny waist, as though it had no body fat. It looked like it had human shoulders, but exaggerated and massive. He said it looked like it had a hump on its back, but he thinks that it was just muscle. He said that the quads were thick, and then from the knees down, the legs were skinny. It had pointed ears and was wolfish looking with a bushy tail like a wolf, that it was black. It had 2 white stripes starting from its ears and running down to its chest. It was watching them from the tall grass. It started running towards the woods, first on 4 legs, then on 2, then back on 4. The witness got a spotlight and headed for the trail where the creature had headed. Because there were ditches on either side of the trail, he thought the creature could be hiding in a ditch, and he decided to go back. The witness doesn't think the creature's around anymore. Thinks it was curious and not stalking them or threatening them, just examining them or watching them. Today's third encounter. July 4th, 2016, two girlfriends and myself decided to raft down the Chattahoochee River and spend some time at the diving rock, laughing at all the drunks enjoying their holiday. This is a North Georgia summer tradition, going back to the 60s. I'm 47 now, but in my youth, I did quite a few times and damn near killed myself doing the gainer off the diving rock when I landed on my belly, inhaled water somehow and nearly drowned. I was fairly drunk and don't remember how I made it back to the surface, but my upper body was purple and the next day my internal organs hurt for weeks. The river was way down that year, maybe 1988. So that made the big flat rock at least 25 feet high off the river. Most people chickened out once they got up there. Anyhow, that Monday, after the last 28 years, we were back at sober now since I haven't drunk alcohol in 10 years. I had to answer the call of nature, number 2, so I walked far back into the dense woods because of all the people, 15 or so, waiting to jump. Having nothing but my bathing suit, I walked much further so I could try to find something akin to toilet tissue. Finally, after I reached a small clearing surrounded by old-growth pines, I began my business. As I'm squatting in a very vulnerable position, out walks a broad daylight, an enormous canine-type creature. I've spent 21 years in the Army, all over the world in 3 different theaters of war, and I've never seen or heard of this creature before. In the 3 days since, I barely slept at all, researching everything in zombified state. I can still taste the fear in my throat and my own vomit. I'm 6 foot tall and a solid 250, and this thing dwarfed me. At least 7'6", maybe 350 to 400 pounds. As a former college and semi-pro footballer and powerlifter, I know about big people and about strength and musculature. And this was no normal creature that evolved somehow in the environment. This was some kind of genetically mixed entity of man, wolf, and primate. My encounter with it lasted for minutes. It displayed a very bizarre behavior and vocalized several times at me. It stunk so bad, horrified me so badly that I retched again and again. I was gone for so long that the girls came looking for me. That's what finally scared it off. When they found me, I was trembling, and I couldn't speak. As a combat lifesaver in the Army, I can tell you for certain that I was in shock from this. Every joint in my body and my ab muscles were still hurting days after. Today's 4th encounter. This occurred early December of 2011 at around 2 in the morning. A friend and I were sitting in my bedroom, hanging out, whenever we both noticed something moving on my surveillance monitor. I had my camera pointed down in my driveway so I could see whenever I had company drive up. When we both looked, I saw what appeared to be a large canine running on all 4s, and in mid-run this thing came up on its hind legs and continued to run across my field and across my drive and into my brother's field on 2 legs. I was in shock, and my friend immediately turned to me with her mouth wide open. I asked her, "What did you just see?" And she replied, "Well, what did you just see?" I saw where this was going, so then I asked her, "How many legs was it running on?" She replied it was running on 4, but went to 2. I then had a cold chill run through my body, as I knew she saw what I had seen. I jumped up and grabbed my night vision scope I recently purchased and ran to the foot of my door, with my friend behind me. I must admit, I was hesitant to open the door for fear of that it might be standing there, so I opened the door while letting out a roar as to maybe shock it if it was there, but it wasn't. Hey, I don't know. I cautiously walked out onto my front porch and took the scope and scanned the front field. There was nothing to see, nor do I know which direction it went, besides where I had seen it last. I waited until daybreak and went out to where it crossed my drive and found a paw print that was a good 12 by 12. I was stunned. I just stood there looking back at the woods it had come from and looked south to where it was headed. I had no way to save the print and did not think to take a picture at the time, nor was my camera recording at the time of the sighting either. From what I could see on the camera, this thing was massive in its upper body. I can still remember seeing the muscles flexing and the muscularity of its upper back as it came to a full height. It was running in the weeds that came to my waist, but on all fours, it was a good 2 feet above them. And when it went to full height, I'd estimate it to be at 8 feet at least. Due to the camera showing only in black and white, I didn't get to see the color, but it was dark. Its head is something else that stands out, as I could see the snout and its pointed ears, which were laid back whenever it went onto 2 legs. I'm an R&D technician, so I am trained to watch for details, and even though this thing was moving fast, faster than any human, I was transfixed on the form and what I was seeing. It was headed south and into property that connects to the Satana Space Center buffer zone, which is over 100,000 acres of untouched, uninhabited acreage that was put aside for the space shuttle program in Hancock County, Mississippi, since the 60s. So it has all the resources it needs in order to survive in those woods and go undetected. I've always been an outdoors man, but since that sighting, I won't go in the woods without a gun on me now. I know for a fact I don't want to run into that thing up close. Today's final encounter. This encounter occurred back during the summer of 2017. I was 17 years old at the time and about to enter my senior year of high school. I live in the town of Sheridan, Wyoming. It's a nice little town. There are plenty of teenagers here who think it's a ghetto town, though, doing and selling drugs. Nevertheless, it's a pretty cozy place. The encounter, however, does not take place within the town of Sheridan. The encounter I'm about to relay to you happened in Bighorn Mountain Range, a spur of mountains connected to the Rockies. Camping with us consisted of myself, my cousin Mike, Andrea, my Aunt Brenda, and Andrea's friend. Mike was about 19 at the time of these events. We had shared a mutual fascination with cryptids, spirits, aliens. Andrea, who was about 15, had shown some interest, but nowhere near the level of intrigue Mike and I had for these mysteries. My Aunt Brenda was a Christian, a firm believer in God, and a strong believer in demons and angels. But cryptids and aliens, not so much. We were camped out next to a decent-sized lake called Park Reservoir, which was usually a popular spot to camp at. However, it was only us and an elderly couple that camped at the lake that day. Mike and I had spent the day four-wheeling the sandy perimeter of the reservoir and fishing for rainbow, brown, and brook trout within the lake. Andrea and her friend spent most of their time either inside the camper or just swimming. My aunt simply just relaxed in her folding chair and enjoyed nature, though she did spend some time four-wheeling by herself. When night came, we all spent some time sitting around the campfire and telling stories. The setting of the night was not really impressive. Clouds blocked the sky, and we couldn't really see any stars. The only visible part of the moon was the light that could barely even pierce through the clouds. Mike and I stayed up a bit later than the others to do some night fishing. Mike claimed that the moon was full, and fishing would occur best during the time we were out by the lake, though the biting action was not that great. We did manage to catch about 6 fish in the end, which consisted of 3 medium-sized rainbow trout ranging from 12 to 13 inches, a decent-sized 14-inch brown, and 2 small brookies, no greater than 9 inches. We kept fishing until about 11:30 at night. If I were to guess, we'd been up pretty late, hoping to catch a large trout, but our hopes were never fulfilled. Nothing out of the ordinary had occurred while we were out by the lake, but that would soon change. Mike and I spent the night outside in the tent, while Brenda, Andrea, and Andrea's friend slept inside the camper. We didn't really mind. However, as we preferred to stay inside the tent, as it was a perfect place to tell scary stories, where we felt more vulnerable, as our only protection was the dome of fabric. We had fallen asleep not long after, though I wouldn't have remained asleep for very long. I woke up to a piercing howl. Similar to the cry of a wolf, it sounded far, but not too far. As it came from the other side of the lake, I was excited about simply just hearing it, because gray wolves were not common sight on the mountains. It was probably too dark for me to see if there was a wolf somewhere around the lake, so I just savored the moment, knowing that there was a wolf in the proximity. I had tried to fall back to sleep following the howl, but my body wouldn't allow me to. I can't explain why. I just felt uneasy. Maybe it was because of those spooky stories that Mike and I had been telling. I spent the entirety of the next half hour feeling uncomfortable. Mike was still sleeping. I thought about waking him up and telling him about the howl, but I decided it'd be better to inform him about it in the morning, as I was once more ready to fall asleep. I heard rustling in the vegetation behind our tent. My everlasting discomfort levels continued rising at an increasing pace. Perhaps it was a raccoon, a mule deer, or maybe a black bear. I had seen a fresh bear scat earlier in the afternoon, and I wouldn't be surprised if a bear decided that it could get an easy meal from the campground. Black bears have quite the reputation for scouring about campgrounds looking for leftovers that humans leave behind. I had left out a bag of Cheetos on the portable folding table that my aunt brought along, and I figured it would have been attracted to that. My cousin had left the flashlight we used when we were out night fishing in the tent, so I grabbed it and decided to investigate. Don't get me wrong, I was nervous. My instincts were trying to tell me not to leave the tent. It was as if my brain was screaming, "Don't go." But my curiosity got the better of me. I shined the flashlight toward the direction of the disturbance, but I couldn't see anything. I didn't move far away from the tent. I stayed in place while slowly shining the flashlight, hoping I would catch a glimpse of something, whether it was a raccoon or a bear. But I saw absolutely nothing. I figured it was simply just a deer that had passed by and went into the bush behind our tent. After a quick recheck, I crawled back into the tent, being as stealthily as possible while climbing back and zipping it up in order not to wake Mike up. By this point, my uneasiness had calmed down, and I felt I could manage to sleep for the rest of the night. So once more, I fell back to sleep. I think I slept for probably an hour, but I don't exactly know. All I know is that it was still pitch black outside when I was awoken to what sounded like the cooler crashing onto its side, spilling ice and soda cans, which slowly rolled onto the hardened soil. I felt my heart race and my adrenaline levels building up, stronger and more potent than ever before. I was so afraid to get up and check it out, but I eventually found enough courage and grabbed the flashlight, which I kept with me inside my sleeping bag. As I slowly slipped out of the sleeping bag, I heard the crumbling of aluminum, as if it was now digging into the bag of Cheetos I had left on the table. As quiet as possible, I unzipped the cover of the tent. I had the flashlight off in order to keep my location hidden, but as if that mattered, because whatever it was had already seen me and was staring at me with bright amber-colored eyes. There was something very off about those eyes. They were about 6.5 to 7 feet off the ground. I felt myself trembling with fear, my heart beating at that point. I felt like I was going to burst. Slowly, I pointed my flashlight toward at the thing and pushed the switch on with my thumb. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a huge wolf that was completely covered in jet black hair. Not only that, but it was standing on 2 legs and had very human-like hands with fingers that ended with sharp black claws, similar to those of a wolf or a dog's. I stood there frozen, just in shock. My tightened throat would not allow me to scream, and my legs wouldn't allow me to run. It was as if this creature's gaze kept me locked in place. The bipedal canine-like creature twitched and pointed its ears in the opposite direction, then slightly gaped its horrendous mouth open to reveal yellow-colored canine teeth layered with streaks of brown plaque. It had purplish-colored gums. I could smell its breath as well. It was terrible. The stench of rotten meat that made my eyes water and my stomach sick. It was a foul odor that put the stench of sulfur and methane to shame. What it did next made my heart sink to the ground, an action that would leave a deep scar in my memory that would plague my nightmares forever. It smiled, a wide, toothy smile that spanned across its muzzle, as if it knew I was terrified and enjoyed seeing me in fear. Then, before I knew it, it swerved around and took off on all fours back into the forest, dropping the bag of Cheetos on the ground. It's as if it wasn't searching for food, but merely seeking to scare someone. It knew we were there, but we didn't know it was there. I stood there like a statue, completely petrified from what I had just seen, until I had a voice coming from the tent. "Zach, what are you doing? Why are you awake?" Mike asked. I stuttered, too afraid to reveal anything about what I had seen. "Well, spit it out," Mike said in a whisper. I didn't say anything, but pointed the flashlight toward the bag of Cheetos on the ground, as well as the cooler that was knocked over. "Did a bear come by, or did you do this in order to prank me?" I slowly looked towards the tent. I could only see his outline and reflecting on his skin. I didn't think he could see me too well, beside from the flashlight I was holding, but I still slowly shook my head side to side, still too afraid to say anything. I climbed back into the tent, but any thought of sleeping was quickly gone. I stayed awake for the remainder of the night, and then morning came. I woke Mike up to tell him my story. I told it from the beginning with the howl, the rustling of the bushes behind the tent, to my encounter. I told him he was just a few minutes too late, or else he would have seen it. I thought he would have thought I was crazy, and that I was just over-dramatizing a bear encounter. But he believed me. He said how my fear felt too genuine, and he even felt scared for a little bit when he saw me up in the middle of the night holding the flashlight, just standing completely still. When my aunt woke up and saw the mess that was created, she asked what happened. I had told her that a black bear came through the camp last night because I knew for certain she wouldn't believe my story. We cleaned up the mess and left that afternoon after loading up the four-wheelers and the camper. Scoured around the area for a bit, but I didn't see any tracks left behind. The only evidence of its presence was the mess that it left behind. I didn't speak the majority of the way back home, which is unusual for everybody, as I was quite talkative. I stared out the window. That haunting image of the smiling beast lingered in my brain. My aunt had asked what was wrong, but I said I was fine and simply just tired. When I got home, I immediately attempted to research Dogman sightings within the Bighorn Mountains, but I could not find any info whatsoever, no matter how much I delved into the topic. It was either that I was the only one who had ever seen it, or people were just afraid to speak up. However, I have a personal theory that this was not a regular Dogman, but perhaps a demon manifesting itself to scare me. I know from research and stories that demons can manifest themselves in different forms in order to scare victims. Whether I actually saw a Dogman or not, I am not certain. I never told this story to anybody beside my cousin. I never told my closest friends or family. I'll never forget my horrific encounter, and I always keep a loaded 10mm semi-automatic pistol with me because I never know whether or not I need it. while I'm not going to personally warn people about camping by the park reservoir, I'll leave this up to you. If you're ever camping and hear something messing with your campsite, always be prepared for the unexpected. You might come face to face with an unwanted guest that might not be a bear or a raccoon. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed tonight's upload, and thank you for all of your support. And I'm not calling everybody that doubted the picture dumb. I'm just saying the ones that said that it was a hoax or made up, because honestly it wasn't. And I stated that. My friend we hadn't spoken years. So, and it just bothers me. You know, I'm constantly getting trolled, and I'm just sick of it, because I honestly just want to share information with everybody. You know, I started this channel in a way of coping with my sickness and being sick. And for some reason, my channel is, I don't know, growing. I don't think I'm that good, but apparently you guys like me. But I'm not trying to look for fame, fortune, or anything. I just want to share stuff, you know, and it bothers me that people are constantly attacking me, you know, and then people, when I discharge back at them, get all butthurt and say I'm a jerk. Well, don't bother me. I'm not bothering you. You know, you're the one choosing to come and listen to my shit. Anyway, I want to thank everybody who has supported me for the long haul, and thank you very much. And I've got a couple of interviews lined up for this week. I know I've got a subscriber. I'm going to reach out to her tomorrow. And just, you know, I really what I want to do is I want to start the new year off right. And I want to start it off with a bang. So, I'm not really sure what to do. So, if you've got any suggestions, please email me, because I'd really like some input on a New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Dogman special. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.